Do you remember the foods from 1970s and 80s American kitchens you'll never see again? They filled dinner tables with color, comfort, and the promise that convenience could taste like home. When did the flavors that defined a generation simply disappear? Mock apple pie was the kind of dish that fooled both your eyes and your taste buds. Made entirely from Ritz crackers, sugar, lemon juice, and a bit of cinnamon, it somehow baked into something that tasted just like apple pie. Housewives in the 1970s swore by it when the fruit bowl was empty or too expensive to refill. It was a clever carryover from the Depression era, where every crumb mattered and every trick in the book was fair game. The crackers softened and absorbed the syrup, forming what could easily pass for cooked apple slices. You could almost forget you were eating pantry scraps disguised as dessert. Served with Cool Whip or a melting scoop of vanilla ice cream, it looked elegant enough for company, even though it cost almost nothing to make. It was thrifty, funny, and strangely delicious, which explains why it survived so long in American kitchens. If someone told you it was the real thing, you might just believe them. But if you knew the truth, you would smile, knowing it represented the heart of old-fashioned creativity, making something sweet from almost nothing at all. Chicken in a biscuit dip was the unsung hero of every snack table in the 1970s and 1980s. The crackers themselves already tasted like savory chicken broth baked into a crunchy square, but when paired with the right dip, they became addictive. People mixed cream cheese, chopped scallions, Worcestershire sauce, and a splash of lemon juice, blending them into a spread that felt fancier than it was. You would walk into a house party or bridge night and see this dip surrounded by those blue boxes like a tiny edible shrine. It was the kind of appetizer that everyone claimed to have their own recipe for, but they all tasted the same. And that was the beauty of it. The flavor was salty, smooth, and oddly comforting, like the memory of TV dinners and old sitcoms. Even today, the brand still exists, but the ritual of serving it with homemade dip has disappeared. Back then, it was more than food. It was an easy way to seem like you cared without spending much time or money. You could always count on it to disappear first, long before the fancier hors d'oeuvres did. Celery stuffed with pimento cheese was once the sign of a good hostess. Those little green sticks, crisp and cold, became tiny vessels for the creamy orange filling that every southern kitchen swore by. The pimento cheese itself was simple: grated cheddar, mayonnaise, diced pimentos, and a dash of paprika. But together with celery, it became a bite that balanced crunch, spice, and creaminess in perfect harmony. People brought it to baby showers, bridge clubs, and potlucks where nothing fancy was expected, but presentation still mattered. The tray would come out chilled, the celery lined like soldiers, and by the end of the afternoon, not one would be left. It was refreshing, inexpensive, and just indulgent enough to feel special. Even in households outside the South, it became a little taste of that charm and hospitality that defined the region's cooking. Today, celery rarely sees the spotlight at parties, and pimento cheese is something you buy in a plastic tub instead of mixing by hand. But for those who remember, that small, humble snack tasted like comfort, tradition, and community all at once. Salmon mousse mold was what every ambitious home entertainer in the 1970s hoped would impress their guests. Imagine canned salmon blended with mayonnaise, cream cheese, gelatin, lemon juice, and Worcestershire sauce, poured into a decorative fish-shaped mold and chilled until firm. The result was a smooth, pink creation that looked like sculpture and tasted like sea air filtered through nostalgia. This was the height of elegance in suburban dinner parties, often served with water crackers, dill garnish, and maybe a sprig of parsley for flair. People treated it like art, even though it jiggled when you poked it. The flavor was surprisingly delicate, creamy, and smoky, but the presentation was the real event. It represented the idea that you could be classy without being wealthy, just creative with your gelatin and a can opener. Those molds now sit in thrift stores, silent reminders of a time when ambition was measured in aspic. Looking back, the whole thing feels both endearing and absurd. But in that moment, this was sophistication, molded and chilled into edible form. Lime Jell-O with cottage cheese and horseradish sounds like a culinary dare, but in the 1970s it was considered refreshing. People mixed lime gelatin with crushed pineapple, whipped cottage cheese, and a dollop of horseradish to give it zing. It was poured into ring molds, chilled until firm, and proudly served on lettuce leaves. Every cookbook of the era included a version of it under the salads section, which says a lot about what counted as salad back then. The color was neon green, the flavor was sweet, spicy, and tangy all at once, and the texture, well, it was an experience. It was a party dish, meant to look cheerful on a buffet table next to deviled eggs and cold cuts. Housewives loved it because it was cheap, impressive, and made entirely from things that lasted forever in the pantry. No one really asked if it was good. It was just what people did. Today, the thought of horseradish floating in lime gelatin might seem like a punchline, but back then, it was proudly part of every celebration. Molded tomato soup salad was the serious cousin of the lime Jell-O salads. It began when someone realized that Campbell's tomato soup could be mixed with gelatin to create a sophisticated molded dish for luncheons. The mixture often included celery, onions, and mayonnaise for texture, and sometimes a touch of vinegar for tartness. The result was an orange-red dome that wobbled proudly on the serving plate, crowned with parsley. Women's magazines described it as elegant, and hostesses believed it added class to their tables. In truth, it was a product of practicality and pride, a way to stretch ingredients while still appearing fashionable. When unmolded perfectly, it felt like an achievement in itself. Served cold and sliced like cake, it was more art than food, and somehow everyone pretended it was delicious. This was the 1970s version of culinary ambition. Not about taste, but about trying something different, something bold. It might make modern diners laugh, but it symbolized creativity in a time when even a can of soup could become a masterpiece. Cheese and pineapple skewers were little toothpick wonders that defined 1970s party tables. They were exactly what they sounded like. Chunks of cheddar and canned pineapple cubes alternated on sticks, then stuck into a foil-covered half grapefruit for presentation. It was colorful, neat, and irresistibly cheerful, like edible decor. Every cocktail party or Christmas gathering had at least one of these glittering centerpieces. The combination of sharp cheese and sweet pineapple was strangely addictive, a perfect balance of salty and tangy that disappeared faster than anything else on the table. It was playful food, not meant to impress, but to delight. Guests loved plucking them one by one, pretending not to notice how many they had eaten. Today, it might seem kitschy, but that was part of its magic. It was homemade fun you could eat. The 1970s may have had strange ideas about sophistication, but they sure knew how to keep a room happy with a grapefruit covered in snacks. Hamburger macaroni ring mold was proof that Americans could turn anything into a ring mold if given the chance. It was made with ground beef, elbow macaroni, tomato sauce, and eggs mixed together, poured into a bundt pan, baked, then flipped upside down like a cake. The result was part casserole, part performance art. Housewives would beam as they unmolded it in front of guests, revealing the perfect ridges of their creation. The texture was firm yet meaty, the kind of dish that felt substantial but still thrifty. It was a clever way to make dinner stretch further during the economic roller coaster of the 1970s. Served with green peas or ketchup glaze, it fit right into the molded food craze of the time. People took pride in how perfect their rings turned out, almost as if the shape itself proved their kitchen skill. Today, the thought of meatloaf in a cake mold might draw laughs, but it once symbolized ingenuity, proof that even dinner could be sculpted. The frosted sandwich loaf was the showstopper of every 1970s luncheon. Layers of white bread were spread with tuna salad, egg salad, or ham salad, stacked high, and then frosted entirely with whipped mayonnaise like a dessert cake. Once sliced, the pastel layers revealed themselves in perfect stripes, drawing gasps from every guest. It was cold, creamy, and so filling, you needed a nap afterward. The loaf was the height of domestic flair, a culinary illusion that blurred the line between savory and sweet. It was all about the reveal, the surprise, the performance of it. Women's magazines promised that it would elevate any gathering, and for a time, it truly did. People took photos, swapped recipes, and tried new fillings like chicken salad or olive spread. Today, the very idea sounds surreal, but it represented a time when creativity ruled over good sense. In the 1970s, making something this elaborate was not about taste. It was about pride. Hot Dr. Pepper with lemon was the strangest comfort drink you never knew existed. In the 1970s, the Dr. Pepper company actually encouraged people to heat their soda on the stove and serve it steaming hot with a slice of lemon. The idea came from a marketing push to boost winter sales, but it actually caught on. People loved how the spiced sweetness of the drink turned syrupy and fragrant, almost like mulled cider. Families would sip it at Christmas gatherings or serve it after skating on frozen ponds. The warmth, the fizz, and that citrus twist made it oddly soothing, even though it defied everything we know about soft drinks. Kids thought it felt grown up, adults thought it was clever, and everyone agreed it smelled amazing. It was a tiny rebellion against cold weather and common sense. Nowadays, no one would dream of boiling soda, but once upon a time, hot Dr. Pepper with lemon was America's idea of cozy innovation. Pickle and peanut butter sandwiches sound like a dare today, but in the 1970s they were a perfectly normal lunchbox favorite. The sharp vinegar of the pickles and the creamy sweetness of the peanut butter somehow worked together in a strange harmony that children absolutely loved. Parents liked it too, because it was cheap, quick, and a great way to use what was already sitting in the pantry. You could find this sandwich at picnics, church potlucks, and kitchen counters all across America. The combination was salty, tangy, and nutty all at once, hitting every part of the palate. It was the kind of weird snack that reflected the boldness of the decade, when recipes were less about rules and more about discovery. Some used dill pickles for crunch, others swore by bread and butter pickles for sweetness. Either way, it stood out on the table. People would raise an eyebrow, take a bite, and end up asking for another. Today, it is remembered with a mix of nostalgia and disbelief. But for those who grew up with it, that strange balance of brine and nut butter still tastes like childhood and summer afternoons. Pork crown roast with applesauce filling was the undisputed showstopper of every major 1970s holiday table. You did not just cook this dish, you presented it. The ribs were tied upright to form a perfect ring like a meaty crown, then roasted until golden and glossy. The hollow center was filled with warm, sweet applesauce or stuffing, making it as dramatic as it was delicious. This was the meal people made to impress their in-laws or the pastor. It looked straight out of a magazine and represented luxury in the middle-class kitchen. Even if you could not afford much else, serving a pork crown roast made you feel like royalty for one night. Its downfall came with the rise of simpler home cooking in the 1980s when microwaves and casseroles replaced ceremonial dinners. Few had the time or patience to truss and roast an entire rack anymore. Yet for a brief shining moment, the pork crown roast stood proudly on American tables, a golden ring of ambition and celebration that made every cook feel like a chef. Grapefruit and shrimp cocktail cups were the definition of mid-century glam that lingered into the 1970s. You would take a grapefruit, cut it in half, scoop out the pulp, and then fill the hollow shell with a mixture of shrimp, mayonnaise, and cocktail sauce. The pinks and yellows gleamed like sunset on a plate, the kind of presentation that said, fancy, without actually costing much. Every ladies' luncheon, church banquet, and hotel brunch had its own variation of it. It was the perfect example of how presentation meant everything. The tangy grapefruit balanced the briny shrimp, while the creamy sauce tied it all together. Eating it felt like a trip to a seaside resort, even if you were sitting at your kitchen table in Ohio. The dish was delicate, cool, and beautifully strange, sweet, sour, and savory in every bite. But by the 1980s, the fashion of stuffing fruits with seafood faded fast. Still, it captured an era when elegance came from creativity, not expense, and a grapefruit shell could make you feel like you were dining in style. prune whip dessert was the kind of sweet treat your grandmother swore by, even as you secretly wondered why. Made from pureed prunes folded into whipped egg whites and sugar, it baked into a light, airy cloud with a subtle fruity tang. This was the healthy dessert of the 1970s, born from a national obsession with fiber and slimming recipes that still felt indulgent. Cookbooks promised that it would satisfy without guilt, and somehow people believed them. Served chilled in parfait glasses or topped with whipped cream, it looked dainty and elegant. Housewives adored it for its simplicity and sense of virtue. Prunes were having a moment back then, considered modern, not medicinal, and this dish made them glamorous for a short while. It was airy, sweet, and vaguely wholesome, the kind of dessert that made you feel like you were taking care of yourself. By the 1980s, the trend vanished as fast as it rose, but for one brief decade, prune whip was America's idea of indulgence you could brag about. Cornflake-crusted fried ice cream was the kind of glorious contradiction only the 1980s could invent. Crispy, hot, cold, and creamy all at once, it was born in restaurants but quickly found its way into home kitchens through cookbooks and magazine recipes. Cooks would roll balls of vanilla ice cream in crushed cornflakes, freeze them solid, then flash fry them for a few seconds until golden. The coating stayed crisp while the inside remained frozen, creating a dessert that defied logic. You might drizzle it with honey, chocolate syrup, or a cherry on top if you wanted to go all out. It was a perfect example of the excess that defined the era. Big flavors, dramatic presentation, and absolutely no concern for calories. Making it at home was a badge of creativity and daring, a sign that you kept up with restaurant trends. Today, it feels like a relic of a more playful time when food was fun, flashy, and just a little ridiculous in the best possible way. Egg and olive loaf sandwich was a staple of 1970s picnic spreads and refrigerator lunches. Made by blending chopped hard-boiled eggs, green olives, mayonnaise, and seasonings into a creamy filling, it was then molded in a loaf pan, chilled, and sliced into neat rectangles. The result looked like luncheon art, pale yellow with little green flecks shining through. Served on white bread or crackers, it was mild yet tangy, easy to make, and inexpensive to feed a crowd. You would find it at ladies' luncheons, Sunday potlucks, and afternoon teas. Everyone's mother or grandmother had their own version, sometimes adding celery for crunch or paprika for color. It was soft, tidy, and satisfyingly nostalgic, with a texture that felt oddly comforting. When food processors became popular, this loaf was one of the first things people tried to perfect. It eventually fell out of favor as tastes turned fresher and lighter, but at the time it was the kind of recipe that made you proud to say, "Yes, I molded my lunch." Mayonnaise cake was a secret that shocked people until they tasted it. Instead of butter or oil, the batter used plain mayonnaise, which added moisture and richness without a trace of tang. It made for an unbelievably soft chocolate cake that stayed fresh for days. This recipe actually dated back to the 1930s, but became a 1970s hit when homemakers rediscovered it through community cookbooks. The idea sounded scandalous at first, but it worked perfectly. The mayonnaise replaced eggs and fat, simplifying the ingredient list and guaranteeing success every time. It was the kind of dessert you brought to gatherings and let people guess what made it so tender. The expressions when you told them were priceless. It became a little kitchen legend, a symbol of how clever thriftiness could lead to genuine magic. Today, people hesitate at the thought, but back then, it was pure genius hiding in plain sight, proof that the most surprising ingredients sometimes made the most beloved cakes. Cheese-stuffed hot dogs wrapped in bacon were everything people loved about cookouts before health warnings took over. You would slice each hot dog down the center, fill it with cheddar or American cheese, wrap it in bacon, and grill until the bacon crisped and the cheese bubbled out. The smell alone could make the whole neighborhood jealous. It was messy, indulgent, and completely irresistible. Every family reunion, 4th of July picnic, and backyard party had at least one uncle proudly manning the grill with these sizzling away. The combination of smoky, salty, and cheesy flavors was everything a summer meal should be. Nobody counted calories. They counted smiles. By the 1980s, people started worrying about cholesterol, and these glorious creations faded into nostalgia. But they were pure joy in edible form, a little rebellion wrapped in bacon. For anyone who grew up in that era, one bite of this would bring back the scent of sunscreen, fireworks, and summer laughter. Glazed ham balls with grape jelly sauce were the definition of a Midwestern potluck masterpiece. Ground ham mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and milk was rolled into bite-sized balls, baked, and then simmered in a thick, glossy sauce made from grape jelly and mustard. The result was sweet, savory, and tangy all at once, a strange combination that somehow worked perfectly. They were easy to make in big batches and looked beautiful, glistening on a platter. Families served them at holidays, church suppers, and graduation parties. Guests always asked for the recipe, and every version was slightly different, depending on whose grandmother made it. This was the kind of dish that turned simple ingredients into a celebration. When microwaves and frozen dinners took over the 1980s, recipes like this slowly disappeared. But glazed ham balls were once the pride of homemade cooking, the perfect blend of comfort, creativity, and small-town flair. Fruit cocktail salad with shredded cheese might just be the strangest salad America ever invented. A can of fruit cocktail was drained, scooped into a bowl, and topped with a sprinkling of sharp cheddar cheese and sometimes even a dollop of mayonnaise. It was sweet, creamy, tangy, and confusing, all in one spoonful. Yet, somehow, it was beloved, especially at potlucks and cafeteria lunches. The bright maraschino cherries and syrupy peaches looked cheerful, while the cheese added a salty bite that people claimed made it balanced. It was a time when rules about what counted as salad barely existed, and creativity ran wild. Housewives swore by it, saying the contrast of fruit and cheese made it fancy. Kids just liked the colors. It was both dessert and side dish, served chilled next to meatloaf or ham. Today, it survives mostly in vintage cookbooks and the memories of those who dared to try it. It might sound strange now, but back then, it was pure Americana in a bowl. Corned beef hash and poached egg casserole was the kind of breakfast that made Sunday mornings feel complete. It was hearty, homey, and designed to feed a crowd without much effort. Layers of canned corned beef hash, chopped onions, and a few cracked eggs baked together in a Pyrex dish until the top turned golden and crisp. The eggs nestled into little pockets of salty beef and potatoes, their yolks turning perfectly soft in the oven's heat. This was comfort food through and through, the kind of meal that filled your kitchen with warmth and your stomach with satisfaction. Families loved it because it used cheap, shelf-stable ingredients and could be made ahead for church mornings or long, lazy weekends. It smelled like home, tasted like tradition, and looked like something out of a 1970s community cookbook. You could dress it up with parsley if you wanted to be fancy, but most people didn't bother. It was perfect as it was, simple, nostalgic, and quietly delicious. The banana and mayonnaise sandwich was a southern comfort that left the rest of the country confused. White bread, soft as clouds, was spread with mayonnaise and layered with ripe banana slices, then pressed together like any other sandwich. The combination sounds wrong until you try it. The sweetness of the banana mixed with the creamy tang of mayo creates a strangely satisfying bite. It was cheap, filling, and oddly elegant in its simplicity. Farmers packed it for lunch and kids found it in their brown bags during school days. Some people added peanut butter or a sprinkle of sugar, but the purists kept it plain. It was one of those recipes that existed quietly in regional kitchens, passed down without question until taste trends changed. By the 1990s, it had vanished completely from cookbooks and lunchboxes, leaving only whispers of its former glory. For those who grew up with it, though, no modern sandwich has ever quite hit the same comforting note. Stuffed celery with cream cheese and pineapple bits was the epitome of 1970s snack table creativity. Celery sticks were chilled until crisp, then filled with a creamy blend of whipped cream cheese and finely chopped canned pineapple. The result was a sweet, savory, and crunchy combination that somehow worked perfectly. Housewives loved it because it was easy to assemble, looked colorful on a tray, and didn't require cooking. It was a regular feature at bridge clubs, baby showers, and backyard get-togethers, where guests would politely take one piece before inevitably coming back for more. The mild cheese balanced the tangy pineapple, and the celery added that refreshing crunch that kept each bite interesting. It was an appetizer that could feel both fancy and familiar. While it might sound like an odd pairing today, it represented the experimental side of mid-century snacking, when mixing fruit with cream cheese felt modern. Now it lives mostly in faded recipe cards and the fond memories of parties past. Spam fried rice with canned peas and soy sauce was the kind of thrifty magic that defined home cooking, before fusion cuisine was a trend. Born out of necessity and wartime influence, it took inspiration from Asian flavors but used entirely American pantry staples. Chopped spam sizzled in a skillet until crisp, then was tossed with leftover rice, canned peas, and a splash of soy sauce. Sometimes a scrambled egg was added for color or a handful of chopped onions for flavor, but that was it. Simple, salty, and completely satisfying. It became a weeknight favorite in countless households, especially for families who wanted something hearty and affordable. The dish was filling, fast, and carried that unmistakable taste of comfort that canned food somehow provided. Kids loved it, parents relied on it, and it quietly bridged cultures without ever meaning to. Today, Spam fried rice feels like a time capsule of ingenuity, proof that great meals could come straight from the cupboard. Tang pie was one of the brightest, boldest desserts ever to hit 1970s kitchens. Made with the same orange drink powder astronauts supposedly drank, it promised a taste that was out of this world. Literally. Home cooks would mix Tang with condensed milk and whipped topping, then pour the citrusy mixture into a graham cracker crust and chill it until firm. The color was a glowing orange, almost electric, and the flavor was equal parts sweet, creamy, and tart. Kids adored it for the novelty, while adults appreciated how easy it was to make without turning on the oven. Every bite tasted like sunshine and nostalgia mixed together. It was the ultimate refrigerator dessert for potlucks, birthdays, or any occasion that needed a splash of color. Over time, Tang faded from pantries, and so did this pie, but for those who remember, that first neon orange slice symbolized a decade obsessed with fun, flavor, and convenience. Potato chip casserole with canned tuna and cream of mushroom soup was the crunchy, salty heart of every quick weeknight dinner. Layers of tuna, canned soup, peas, and crushed potato chips baked together in one bubbling dish that smelled like comfort itself. It was the kind of meal kids looked forward to all day, the creamy sauce beneath, the crispy topping above, and the soft noodles or rice tying it all together. Moms loved it because it used pantry ingredients, took minutes to prepare, and somehow managed to stretch a single can of tuna to feed the whole family. It was thrifty, cozy, and proudly unpretentious. The crushed chips added just enough fun to make dinner exciting for even the pickiest eaters. It captured everything about 1970s home cooking, resourceful, filling, and unapologetically rich. While it might not fit today's health trends, back then it was the taste of love-baked golden brown in a Pyrex dish. Layered Jell-O with sour cream. Between colors was a masterpiece of patience and presentation. Each brightly colored gelatin layer had to set before the next one could be poured, with thin ribbons of sour cream or whipped topping separating the stripes. The result was a shimmering rainbow that looked almost too pretty to eat. Every ambitious home cook of the 1970s had at least one of these chilling in the fridge before a big family gathering. Kids loved to watch the light bounce off the colors, while adults marveled at how perfectly each layer held together. It wasn't just dessert, it was decoration. The tangy cream between layers added richness that cut through the sweetness, giving each bite a surprising depth. Making it took time, patience, and precision, which made it a true badge of pride. Today it feels like a relic of another era, but once this wiggling rainbow ruled the American dining table. Tomato soup. Spice cake was a dessert that raised eyebrows but won hearts. Cooks mixed a can of condensed tomato soup with flour, sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg, to create a batter that baked into a moist, fragrant cake. The soup added a hidden richness and deep color without tasting like tomatoes at all. It was one of those secret ingredient recipes that turned skepticism into delight with the first bite. The flavor was warm, spiced, and comforting, especially when topped with cream cheese frosting or a dusting of powdered sugar. Campbell's even ran advertisements featuring it, calling it the surprise cake. People loved it for its thriftiness and simplicity, and it became a staple in potlucks and bake sales. Over the years, it disappeared quietly as trends changed, but anyone who ever tasted it remembers being astonished that something so odd could taste so good. Frozen fruit salad with Miracle Whip was the kind of sweet side dish that grandmothers swore by. It was made by folding canned fruit cocktail into whipped topping and Miracle Whip, then freezing the mixture in paper muffin cups. Before serving, it was thawed just enough to be soft around the edges, but still icy in the center. The flavor was tart, creamy, and nostalgic all at once. It fit perfectly alongside baked ham or pot roast, the chill cutting through the richness of the meal. The little frozen cups looked festive on any table, especially during holidays. It was thrifty, simple, and beloved by everyone who ever tasted it. Though today most people prefer fresh fruit salads, this retro frozen version remains a sweet symbol of home kitchens where love was measured in scoops, not recipes. Shredded carrot and raisin mold with lemon gelatin was what passed for a salad in 1970s America. It glowed bright orange on every buffet table, a wobbly ring of grated carrots suspended in lemon Jell-O with plump raisins floating throughout. The flavor was a curious mix of sweet and tart, more dessert than side dish, but no one seemed to mind. It was cheerful, inexpensive, and looked right at home next to a roast or meatloaf. Cooks loved it because it was foolproof. You could not ruin it even if you tried. The tangy lemon paired surprisingly well with the earthy carrot, giving it a flavor that was both refreshing and familiar. Served chilled, it offered a cool contrast to hot dinners, making it a staple of family gatherings and potlucks. It might seem odd today, but back then, it was just another example of how playful and fearless home cooking could be. Cheese, sausage, and croissant strata is this really comforting brunch dish that actually works amazingly for potlucks. It works because it's the perfect little starter to bring to a party. Most people already know who's going to be bringing what, and there are designated people who bring the really heavy-hitter dishes. That leaves people who really need to nail the sides, appetizers, and desserts. For them, this dish was literally a no-compromise sort of thing. It was absolutely impossible to have a potluck without somebody bringing over a croissant strata, especially if you lived in the openly French neighborhoods. Sorry, by that I mean the ones who would cook nothing else but French food. Strata has lots of layers, especially in Italy, where they take the attention to detail super seriously. Traditional strata recipes make use of sliced bread, baguettes, croissants, and all kinds of other things. This dish was experimented with a lot while it was becoming a big thing in America, so you had people all over the country doing their own version of a strata. Lots of people played around with the kinds of cheeses you could use, or they would switch out the sausages for some other meat. Either way, it was a wonderful little bread-based dish to serve as a filler until the next big meal. Cornbread pudding, the perfect hybrid of savory and sweet, takes cornbread to a whole new level. This casserole-style dish features a custardy texture, with the comforting cornbread flavor acting as a base. Whether you're serving it as a side dish or a dessert, it's versatile enough to fit in any meal. Some versions are made with a rich, buttery sauce that soaks into the cornbread, adding depth to the flavor. Others might include a touch of sweetness, thanks to ingredients like brown sugar or maple syrup, creating a delightful balance of flavors. It's the kind of dish that's perfect for big gatherings, offering a taste of home and nostalgia with each bite. And just when you think this is the perfect combination of textures, there's a dish waiting to take comfort food to the next level. Stay tuned for the next unforgettable recipe. In the mid-20th century, when creativity in the kitchen often stemmed from necessity, benevolent Bologna cups made their debut as an ingenious way to stretch humble ingredients into a crowd-pleasing dish. A simple slice of Bologna, baked into a cup shape in a muffin tin, became the perfect edible vessel for mashed potatoes, macaroni salad, or even coleslaw. This dish was both playful and practical, a combination that fit perfectly with the spirit of community potlucks and church picnics. The versatility of Bologna cups was their standout feature. They could be filled with just about anything, making them adaptable to whatever leftovers or budget-friendly ingredients were on hand. They were also easy to portion and serve, making them ideal for large gatherings. And let's not forget their visual appeal. Seeing rows of neatly filled Bologna cups on a table added a touch of whimsy to any spread. So, what led to their decline? Over time, Bologna itself fell out of favor as food trends shifted toward fresher, less processed ingredients. The rise of more elaborate appetizers and finger foods also nudged this humble dish aside. Swiss steak is definitely something that was mostly a traditional 20th century concept, though. It was pretty common for the working class almost everywhere to rely on potlucks. Who could blame them? You find something that ticks most boxes, or in some cases, all of them. You keep it close. Everyone does that. Don't you have your comfort fast food places you swear by and always go to when you need an order you can rely on? Swiss steak was pretty much just like that, and it was the first time that people got to know about Swissing meat. That's, by the way, where it gets the name from, not any cultural ties to Switzerland. Lots of people were relying on tough cuts of meat that weren't really the same kind of quality, but they were a lot more affordable. People figured that some pork is better than no pork, and again, could you fault them? Still, these kinds of recipes needed a lot of work to really make them shine and not just be a slogfest you have to chew your way through. Swissing the meat and slow cooking it potluck style made sure that it would be soft and tender, and in the end, you'd get a pretty wonderful saucy stew. Few dishes from the 1970s could walk the line between savory and sweet quite like this one. Sweet potato souffle did just that. It was a culinary bridge between vegetables and dessert. With its cloud-like texture, cinnamon-kissed sweetness, and the signature marshmallow topping, it offered both comfort and spectacle at every church potluck or holiday gathering. The dish has deep roots in Southern cooking, where sweet potatoes have been a staple for centuries. During the mid-20th century, this recipe gained widespread popularity as canned goods and convenience foods became kitchen staples. Marshmallows, introduced in the late 1800s and heavily marketed in the 20th century, were the final flourish, a whimsical, sugary topping that turned a simple casserole into a crowd pleaser. Yet, as tastes evolved, the souffle began to fade from weekly menus. The sugar-heavy marshmallow layer clashed with growing concerns about healthier eating. Sweet potatoes themselves survived the shift, reborn as fries, chips, and roasted sides. But the souffle, with its unapologetic decadence, became relegated to holiday tables and church cookbook archives. In the world of potlucks and church picnics, the holy Hogie dip was the kind of dish that sparked curiosity and kept people coming back for seconds. Inspired by the classic Italian hoagie, this creamy dip combined diced deli meats like salami and ham, provolone cheese, crisp lettuce, tomatoes, onions, and zesty Italian dressing, all folded into a creamy mayonnaise base. Served with toasted baguette slices or crackers, it was essentially a hoagie deconstructed and ready to share. No messy sandwiches required. The dip's rise in popularity during the late 20th century mirrored America's love for Italian-inspired cuisine and the growing trend of turning traditional dishes into crowd-friendly dips. Its versatility made it a potluck superstar. Adjust the meats, toss in some hot peppers for spice, or lighten it up with low-fat ingredients. The options were endless. Plus, its no-cook preparation meant less time in the kitchen and more time enjoying the gathering. So why did it fade into obscurity? Part of the decline can be attributed to a cultural shift toward lighter, healthier fare. The cream-based dips of yesteryear gave way to hummus and veggie platters. Grape jelly meatballs. Yes, you read that right. These sticky sweet meatballs have been a church potluck legend for decades, and though it might sound like an odd combination, it's one that's impossible to resist. The meatballs are simmered in a rich sauce made from grape jelly and chili sauce, creating a perfect balance of sweet and tangy flavors that you can't help but go back for more of. Every church gathering seemed to have a dish or two that disappeared faster than the others, And these grape jelly meatballs were always at the top of the list. Served hot and with toothpicks for easy eating, they're the perfect appetizer for any event. Despite their simplicity, the combination of flavors has earned them a special place in many hearts. And just when you think you've seen all the unique salads and casseroles, there's one more dish that combines sweetness and a bit of nostalgia. Stay tuned for the next one. Fresh, vibrant, and undeniably wholesome, fellowship fruit kebabs were a beacon of color on church picnic tables. In an era when gelatin molds and mayonnaise-based salads reigned supreme, these skewers offered a refreshing alternative. Simple yet elegant, they featured a variety of seasonal fruits, pineapple, melon, grapes, and berries, artfully arranged on sticks and drizzled with a honey-lime glaze. The practicality of fruit kebabs was one of their biggest selling points. Easy to assemble, they required no utensils, making them a perfect grab-and-go option for outdoor gatherings. Plus, their versatility made them universally appealing. Whether you preferred tropical fruit, classic apple chunks, or a mix of whatever was on sale, the recipe adapted to suit any budget or taste. Add in the bright, tangy kick of honey and lime, and you had a snack that balanced natural sweetness with a touch of zest. So, what caused this recipe to slip into obscurity? Partly, the rise of pre-cut fruit platters took away the need for the extra effort. Additionally, the modern obsession with charcuterie boards and grazing tables overshadowed the humble kebab. In the 1980s and 1990s, lighter, vegetable-forward dishes began making their way onto picnic tables as health-conscious trends gained momentum. Ewing Steele's orange rolls are a wholesome little pit stop in Southern and Midwestern cooking. They're fluffy, sweet, and just about the opposite of everything you've come to expect so far on this list. The dish itself refers to a pretty specific variant that got popular throughout the South. Ewing Steele himself is known for making these. I mean, it's in the name. But the rolls themselves represented a lot. They had typical American baking traditions such as puff pastries and buttery rolls, but they mixed that in with oranges, sweet tastes, and really comforting textures. That was common in Southern desserts, so it was a blend of both points of American cooking. Now, while people believe that Ewing Steele made it, they aren't sure, because there's no documented recipe or cookbook that shows us a process of him developing the dish. All we know is that it first popped up in the South, and then it popped up at everyone's potlucks. Those bright citrus flavors were the perfect thing to bring to a potluck. Few desserts carry the warmth of tradition quite like a baked custard rice pudding. Reverent rice pudding was a staple at church gatherings, offering creamy comfort with a touch of cinnamon spice and the sweetness of raisins. It was the kind of dish that felt like home, evoking memories of simpler times when nothing in the pantry went to waste. Rice pudding's history stretches back centuries, with variations found in nearly every culture that had access to rice and milk. In the United States, it gained popularity during the 19th century, when rice became widely available and recipes emphasized frugality. By the 1970s, baked versions with eggs, milk, and sugar added a custardy richness, while cinnamon and raisins gave it a warm, familiar flavor. It was versatile, too, served as a dessert, a snack, or even a breakfast dish. But as dessert trends shifted in the late 20th century, rice pudding began to fade. Its humble simplicity couldn't compete with the rise of more decadent sweets like chocolate lava cakes or the colorful allure of gelatin desserts. The time-intensive baking process also made it less appealing in an era of quick fixes. Southern soul chili is pretty much exactly what you'd expect that to taste like. You put the words Southern soul and chili together, and you paint a pretty colorful picture of the Southwest and Texas potlucks. The evolution of this dish is actually pretty closely rooted in Native American, Mexican, and Spanish cultures, though. Over time, it's begun to involve all kinds of things, like beef and chili peppers and even tomatoes and beans. The beans were a pretty new addition, because it wasn't until the Depression that people began to use pinto beans and kidney beans. Even black-eyed beans were things that people took to a lot. Southern soul chili in general was a unique spin that drew a lot of its style from soul food staples and a lot of its flavors from Southern cuisine. You had the chili and the focus on natural ingredients, which was something you'd get from soul food. Still, the smoked meats and sweet potatoes were unmistakable. That was a Southern classic if I've ever seen one. Where else do you see that much smoked brisket being used? Or that much pulled pork? Either way, this makes for one really explosive chili, so try it at your own risk. Tomato aspic is one of those dishes that many people have strong feelings about. Either you loved it, or you dreaded seeing it on the table. A savory gelatin mold made with tomato juice, celery, and spices, tomato aspic is a dish that was often served at church luncheons and family gatherings. The texture of the gelatin, combined with the sharpness of the tomato and the subtle crunch of celery, made for a unique flavor profile that was often polarizing. Yet, for those who appreciated it, tomato aspic was an elegant way to serve a chilled side dish that felt just a little fancier than a typical salad. It might have been a bit of a hard sell at first glance, but once people started eating it, they understood its appeal. If you can appreciate the charm of this quirky dish, you're going to love the next sweet and creamy salad that brings a whole new meaning to the word heavenly. In the 1980s and 1990s, when potluck spreads began leaning toward lighter, more sophisticated dishes, almighty almond chicken salad earned its place on the table. This creamy, savory sweet combination of shredded chicken, sliced almonds, juicy grapes, and a touch of mayo was a refined twist on a classic. It brought elegance to any gathering while remaining simple enough to whip up in a home kitchen. What made this salad a standout was its versatility. It could be served in a variety of ways, on a bed of lettuce, as a sandwich filling, or even scooped into hollowed-out melon halves for a fancier presentation. The ingredients were affordable and adaptable. Cooks could swap in walnuts for almonds, yogurt for mayo, or dried cranberries for grapes, tailoring the recipe to suit their pantry or taste. So, why did it disappear? As prepackaged chicken salads flooded grocery stores, the effort of making this dish from scratch lost its appeal for busy households. Additionally, shifting dietary preferences and the move toward leaner, vinaigrette-based salads further edged it out. In the heyday of retro desserts, charity cherry salad was a shining star at potlucks and family gatherings. This chilled dish combined bright maraschino cherries, velvety cream cheese, and fluffy whipped topping, creating a dessert that was as vibrant as it was indulgent. Served in elegant glass bowls or set in decorative molds, it added a touch of flair to any church supper table. The popularity of dishes like this can be traced back to the mid-20th century, when refrigeration revolutionized home cooking. Desserts that could be prepared ahead of time and served cold became the ultimate convenience for busy homemakers. Maraschino cherries, first commercialized in the early 1900s, were a pantry favorite thanks to their long shelf life and striking red color. Blending them with cream cheese and whipped topping was a clever way to create a dessert that felt rich but remained affordable. Despite its charm, charity cherry salad fell out of fashion as modern palates shifted away from overly sweet processed ingredients. The rise of fresh fruit salads and lighter desserts in the late 20th century further sealed its fate. In the culinary playbook of the 1970s, green beans weren't just a side dish, they were often dressed to impress. Graceful green bean bundles wrapped in smoky bacon and glazed with brown sugar offered an elegant upgrade to the humble vegetable. With their sweet and savory allure, these bundles quickly became a favorite at church potlucks and holiday dinners. The dish's appeal lay in its balance of practicality and flair. Green beans were an accessible and affordable vegetable, while bacon and brown sugar transformed them into something festive. The bundles were easy to assemble and bake, making them a convenient choice for busy cooks. They also served dual purposes. They worked as both a side dish and an appetizer, seamlessly bridging the gap between finger food and a plated meal. By the late 20th century, however, changing tastes and dietary trends began to edge these bundles off the table. The combination of bacon and sugar, once seen as indulgent, started to feel overly rich for everyday fare. Health-conscious cooking also played a role, as lighter vegetable dishes gained popularity. Pimento cheese spread is a Southern favorite that found its way into almost every church kitchen, making an appearance at picnics, church lunches, and family gatherings. This creamy, cheesy spread combines sharp cheddar cheese with diced pimentos, mayonnaise, and a touch of seasoning to create a rich, tangy, and slightly sweet spread that's perfect for just about anything. Whether it was slathered on crackers, served as a dip for celery, or spread thick on white bread triangles, pimento cheese spread was a go-to appetizer that could be made in minutes and was loved by all. The combination of sharp cheddar and mild pimentos was simple yet delicious, offering a comforting flavor that no one could resist. It's the kind of dish that became a tradition in many church kitchens, passed down from one generation to the next. And speaking of spreads, the next dish brings a surprising sweetness to the table, a cake that's rich in history and flavor. Stay tuned. During the mid-20th century, Jell-O desserts were the crown jewels of church picnics and potlucks, and cherished cranberry Jell-O squares were no exception. This layered creation brought together the tartness of cranberry gelatin, the sweetness of crushed pineapple, and the creamy richness of a whipped cream cheese topping. Its vibrant red hue made it visually striking, while the contrasting textures kept guests coming back for seconds. The practicality of this dish was undeniable. Gelatin-based desserts were inexpensive, easy to prepare, and required little more than a refrigerator and some patience. The recipe's versatility added to its appeal. Home cooks could swap in other fruits, experiment with different flavors of Jell-O, or even add chopped nuts for extra crunch. It was a crowd pleaser that could double as a side dish or a dessert, making it an all-star at potlucks. So why did this classic fade away? As tastes shifted toward fresher, less processed ingredients, gelatin dishes began to lose their charm. The rise of lighter, fruit-forward desserts also pushed these nostalgic treats to the sidelines. But for those who remember the wobble of a perfectly set square and the creamy tang of the topping, cherished cranberry Jell-O squares remain a sweet reminder of an era when creativity in the kitchen met the needs of a growing community. In the world of comfort desserts, few could match the magic of a self-saucing, virtuous vanilla pudding cake. This clever dish baked into two distinct layers, a fluffy vanilla cake on top and a rich, warm pudding underneath. Simple, satisfying, and slightly mysterious, it was a favorite at church potlucks where ingenuity and indulgence often went hand in hand. Self-saucing cakes date back to the early 20th century, gaining popularity during the Great Depression when frugality was key. By the 1970s, the vanilla variation became a staple of community cookbooks, praised for turning pantry basics, flour, sugar, milk, and eggs, into something that felt both luxurious and homemade. Its practicality was unbeatable. Minimal ingredients, no frosting needed, and a built-in sauce that made it feel like two desserts in one. But as dessert trends grew more elaborate in the 1980s and beyond, this humble cake struggled to keep up. The rise of rich layer cakes, cheesecakes, and decorative confections made its understated appearance less appealing. Additionally, the convenience of boxed cake mixes overshadowed the charm of from-scratch baking. Prayerful pasta primavera salad was one of these newcomers, combining tender pasta with fresh, crisp vegetables like bell peppers, cherry tomatoes, and zucchini. Tossed in a zesty Italian vinaigrette, this cold salad brought vibrant colors and refreshing flavors to any gathering, offering a welcome reprieve from heavier dishes. This salad excelled in versatility and practicality. It could be prepared a day ahead, allowing the flavors to meld together beautifully. And it traveled well, perfect for outdoor church picnics. The recipe was also flexible. Any combination of vegetables could be used, depending on what was in season or on hand. Even picky eaters could find something to enjoy in its customizable mix. Add a sprinkle of Parmesan, and it could easily transition from a simple side dish to a more filling option. So why has it become a rarity? As pre-packaged pasta salads and pre-made dressings became widely available, the labor of chopping fresh vegetables and mixing homemade vinaigrettes seemed less appealing. Modern convenience overshadowed the care that went into making this dish. Tuna noodle casserole with crushed chips was the ultimate budget-friendly, pantry-stretching weeknight meal that saved many busy families. Made with canned tuna, noodles, and a creamy sauce, this dish was easy to assemble and always satisfying. The real magic came with the topping, crushed potato chips sprinkled over the casserole, giving it that perfect crunch that made every bite so delicious. It's the kind of dish that's simple but never boring, offering a comforting blend of flavors that everyone could enjoy. This casserole was a go-to for busy parents who wanted a meal that could feed a crowd without breaking the bank. It's a meal that's been passed down through the years, often showing up at church events and potlucks. And while this casserole might be the perfect weeknight dinner, there's a sweet, creamy salad coming next that will add a touch of magic to any table. Stay tuned for the next nostalgic favorite. Mid-century America loved a dish that could pull double duty, easy to prepare and satisfying enough to feed a crowd. Picnic pea salad supreme fit the bill perfectly. This chilled salad, made with sweet green peas, crispy bacon, shredded cheddar, and a creamy dressing, was a real statement. In an era when canned and frozen vegetables were kitchen staples, this salad offered a way to transform humble peas into something extraordinary. It became a picnic regular, especially in the Midwest, where hearty and easy-to-make recipes reigned supreme. What made this dish so practical was its adaptability. The ingredients were pantry-friendly, the preparation was straightforward, and it held up well outdoors. No one likes a salad that wilts before the blessing. Its sweet and savory flavors appealed to kids and adults alike, and its vibrant colors made it visually appealing on any potluck table. Plus, bacon and cheddar, arguably the ultimate crowd-pleasing duo, did a lot of the heavy lifting. So, what happened? Well, somewhere along the line, supreme salads lost their shine. Health-conscious trends and the rise of pre-made options nudged recipes like this into obscurity. Few desserts capture the retro charm of the mid-20th century like the pineapple upside-down cake. Its signature design, caramelized pineapple slices and bright red maraschino cherries embedded in a golden cake, made it as visually striking as it was delicious. Praise pineapple. Upside-down cake was more than just a dessert. It was a conversation piece at church potlucks and community dinners. The dish rose to popularity in the 1920s and 1930s thanks to the invention of canned pineapple by the Hawaiian Pineapple Company. Their marketing campaigns promoted recipes featuring pineapple, and the upside-down cake, with its sweet, sticky topping, became an instant hit. By the 1950s and 60s, it had become a potluck classic, celebrated for its simplicity. Just one pan, and its ability to turn everyday ingredients into a dessert that felt festive. As tastes evolved in the late 20th century, the cake began to lose its luster. The heavy use of canned ingredients and its sugary glaze didn't align with the growing emphasis on fresh, lighter desserts. Additionally, its iconic appearance became a symbol of an earlier era, less appealing to younger bakers seeking more modern flavors and aesthetics. In the mid-20th century, before charcuterie boards became the height of culinary fashion, there was the humble yet beloved righteous relish tray. A staple at church picnics and potlucks, this platter featured an assortment of pickles, olives, and pickled vegetables, often accompanied by crackers or crusty bread. Simple yet striking, it was the perfect blend of salty, tangy, and crunchy, an ideal prelude to heartier fare. The historical roots of the relish tray can be traced back to a time when home canning was common, and pickled vegetables were a way to preserve the harvest. Offering an array of pickles at a gathering was not only practical, but also a point of pride for the home cooks who had prepared them. The versatility of the tray was another advantage. It could include anything from classic dill pickles and sweet gherkins to pickled carrots, onions, or even spicy peppers, making it easy to tailor to personal tastes or seasonal availability. So why has the relish tray largely vanished from modern tables? The rise of convenience foods played a big role. Store-bought appetizers and snack mixes replaced the need for handcrafted platters. Italian hot dishes, on the other hand, are a Minnesota classic. You couldn't go a day in the streets of the upper Midwest without being dazzled by all the different kinds of fragrances. By strong, alluring scents, I really just mean everyone's and their grandma's different takes on a hot dish. It was a tradition that came during the rise of casseroles in the 1950s, and it was something that became a pantry staple at one point. Casseroles were sort of the thing to eat back then because you could just get everything done with them. They became one of the most popular meals to make for home chefs because there wasn't a dinner where somebody would pout and go like, "Aw, casserole?" Even if it wasn't a lot each and every time, people still got visibly excited seeing mom pop out of the kitchen with some casserole. Italian hot dishes especially were something to celebrate because it meant she was really going all out for the occasion. Despite this dish not really having much Italian history, it caught the name because it uses a lot of Italian staples. You have your tomato sauces, your pasta, and of course the freshest kind of cheese you could find. If anything, it definitely has Italian stereotypes. Which of these vanished dishes do you remember? Drop it in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more bites of Forgotten America.